Well, as President Schill was quick to point out, my real qualification here is that I have a JD from the University of Oregon, as do two of my colleagues. Our president of the university is not, but we'll let that pass for now. Cognizant of my job to be seen and not heard as the moderator, I think we'll just jump in. As we said, we have Chief Justice Walters here. We have the Attorney General Rosenblum and President Michael Schill from the University of Oregon. And I think rather than do introductions, we'll just have you introduce yourself at the beginning of your first comments. And the first question is one near and dear to my heart. What is the current state of judicial infrastructure and what are the most pressing needs? Justice Walters. Yes.
Hello, I will introduce myself. My name is Martha Walters, and I am the Chief Justice of the Oregon Supreme Court. I've had that job for 1 year. I am also a resident of Lane County, so I'm happy to be able to stay in my home county today. Before I went to the court in 2006, I was... Before I joined the Oregon Supreme Court in 2006, I was a lawyer in Eugene for about 30 years, and I represented a number of small towns at that time. I represented Drain, I represented Candyville, and I represented Gold Beach, a coastal community. And I realized during that practice, it was one of the most fun things that I did, because it was ordinary people and making up government. And I got to understand what government really was, like trying to figure out how are we going to provide water, how are we going to charge for water, how are we going to collect our water bills. And at the same time, the towns faced very complex problems. In Drain, they received a bill for their share of the cost of the nuclear power plant that never produced a single watt of electricity. And I was involved in the case of DeFazio, where I met Representative DeFazio versus Whoops. And I realized how the cost of litigation can really break the budget of a small community. So then, now, as a judge, I'm looking at government from a different way, from the judicial branch side of things, but I realized that it has so much in common with what I learned before. How we have regular, ordinary people trying to do their best to fulfill our mission. And I just wanted to tell you the actual words of what our mission is as a judicial branch. It's to provide fair and accessible justice services that protect the rights of individuals, preserve community welfare, and inspire public confidence. That is what our hardworking employees of our court try to do every single day. And I'm thrilled to be here to be able to talk to you about those courts, because I believe so much in them. I'm very thankful to Senator Rosenblum for including us and the courts in this important discussion about the importance of our courts to the communities. And I really hope that we can talk together about how to strengthen our judicial system. So now, that's my little introduction. I'm going to try to take on the actual question that I was asked. And I love thinking about the judicial system as necessary to the infrastructure of our state, because it really is. Before I talk about that infrastructure, I want to talk about the needs that the infrastructure is designed to meet. So the first thing that we think about when we think about courts is our criminal justice system, trying to make sure that we hold people accountable for their violations of the law. And every year, our courts deal with parking ticket violations. In Portland alone, that's 287,000 cases. And then the rest of the state, 281,000 violations that we deal with. Then we've got felonies and misdemeanors, and in a year we have 71,000 of those filed in our courts. So that's the criminal side of things. Then you look to the other side, which we call the civil side. That's where we deal with disputes between businesses in commercial realm, claims for personal injury, car accidents, product defect cases, cases involving employment, sexual harassment, wrongful discharge, discrimination. We enforce contracts from the small ones, like people being held for make their car payments to the big ones like the nuclear power plant contracts. We just decide disputes between family members. In a year, we have about 44,000 family law cases decided in our courts, dissolution of marriage, restraining orders. Then we have the mentally ill who come to our courts. In a year, we have about 7,000 cases where people are being questioned whether they will be civilly committed to treat their mental health illnesses. What about the elderly? We have guardianships and conservatorships, and we oversee over $1 billion in assets in those cases. Kids, we do adoptions. We intervene when children have been neglected and review their placements. When questions arise about their special needs, as Senator Rosenblum knows, because he was involved in a case that I had that dealt with that, we take on those cases about reasonable accommodation. Housing, when landlords need to have a tenant evicted because they haven't fulfilled their obligations, they come to us. Tenants come to us to enforce their rights. We've got mortgage foreclosures. We've got about 18,000 landlord-tenant cases that we hear in a year. Then don't forget about small claims, 54,000, and cases against big government. When people think that government hasn't fulfilled its obligations, or when government wants a declaration of its authority, they come to us. We've got land use disputes. We've got workers' comp disputes. We've got all the agency decisions that can come to our court for review. So all in all, in the civil side, we have about 150,000 cases filed in our courts every year. And then there's the tax court, and there are the appellate courts. So we need an infrastructure that can make sure that we can meet all of those needs that I've described. Okay, so you think, whoa, that is a lot that is coming to your courts. What kind of infrastructure do you have to deal with all that? Well, it's mostly made up of people. But if the cost of the infrastructure for all of that is less than 3% of our general fund, we're able to do all of that for that small amount of money, and with approximately 200 judges and approximately 1,800 FTE. We are small, but we can do it because our people are so dedicated. The staff that does all the processing of all those motions, sets all those cases to be tried, sets up the website, answers the questions, is at the counter, all of those people, they care so much about our mission. I talked to a trial court administrator who said, what shall I do? I've got an employee who wants to go on her annual hunting trip, but she wants to take her computer with her because she's so afraid that she'll be needed. People will need her while she's gone. That's the kind of people that we have that allow us, even though we're so carefully funded, to meet our statutory responsibilities. And we do it because we're able to do it because we've created efficiencies. We have a statewide unified court system, and we have been making use of technology. But I'm going to tell you just the 5 pressing needs that we have that show you that even though we're holding on and we're doing what we can, we really can't do. We're not as strong as we should be, and we're not really doing all that we could to help with the problems that face our state. So our first real need is to have the staff necessary to keep our courts open to the public. Very few of our courts are able now to be open all days of the week, all hours of the day. They close a lot of times during noon hour or late in the afternoons because their staff is pressed with all those other things I told you that they need to do. We got in this last session the restoration of 80 positions that had been authorized but not funded, and that was a huge thing that happened. Senator Johnson, we're so thankful to you on the Ways and Means Committee, and Senator Rosenblum and others of you who are here for getting us those 80 positions. It's made a big difference, and we're very hopeful that we're going to be able to open our courts. But our greatest need, our greatest infrastructure is people, and our greatest need is for staffing. We also need judges and staff to make timely decisions in our cases. It's very important and increasingly important in this world that the people get answers to their questions expeditiously. People don't want to wait. Businesses cannot wait. People cannot wait to have their disputes resolved. We got a letter from a woman who, it was in a tragic situation. Her daughter was in a car accident. She was in the 3rd trimester of her pregnancy. The daughter died in the car accident. The baby survived. There was a custody dispute over who was going to take care of that baby. It was set for trial. The people were, it was very emotional to relive what had happened. It was very difficult to have a dispute about this baby. They had expert witnesses. They were all ready. They spent days preparing. They got to court, and the court said, I'm sorry, we don't have a judge. That judge from the that we had to continue on in the trial. We don't have any more. We're going to have to wait. Your case is postponed. 5 months. 5 months they had to wait for that case to come back up, and in that time the family quarreled and things fell apart, and it was a disaster for that child and that family. They needed their case resolved earlier. I've had similar expressions of the need for timeliness from businesses. You've got a partnership. Are we going to have to sell the business? Can we work it out? Employees waiting and hanging is just very difficult. So this last time again in the legislature, we received 2 new judges, particularly to help us on our dependency cases, which is very important that we move those cases along and determine whether children should be taken from their families or removed, or how to get them in permanent placements. And these judges were particularly to help us with the timeline on those cases. The legislature understands the real need for our courts to have the resources to timely decide our cases, and they respond, and it's really terrific. We have a need for recruiting and training of judges and staff. We just do not have the time and resources to bring them up to speed on all these huge areas of law that I've told you about, the breadth of the law. And what about the new laws that are passed every year? I can't remember how many new laws were just passed. What was it, Representative Wilde? 700 new laws. So they can't barely breathe trying to administer the law that they already know. And now they've got to learn 700 new laws when they don't have time to try the case for the woman who needs her custody of her child determined. Now, how are we going to take time out to train them? And how are we going to have the resources for the training? So the recruitment of judges and the training of judges is a huge issue for us. Then we need safe courthouses, as Judge Bockhart mentioned. We have our counties, how we've got things in Oregon. The counties are responsible for the physical facilities where we dispense justice. We've got many old courthouses, many courthouses that are unsafe. The state has been stepping up, using its bonding authority to help us with that, but we do have employees who are fearful, and the public who is fearful, so we need to do better there. And then our 5th need there's more, but I'm only telling you about the most pressing ones. We have a lot of people coming to our courthouses who are unrepresented. They don't have lawyers. They feel like they can't afford lawyers. In our criminal cases, they're appointed a lawyer to represent them if they can't afford one, but in our civil cases, there's no right to that. So people come many times either represented by legal aid, but they're only meeting 15% of the need, so the rest of the people are coming without lawyers. And in our family law cases, that's in over 80% of the cases, we've got at least one party who doesn't have a lawyer. So our staff and our judges are prohibited by law from giving legal advice to those people, but we have to help them navigate the system some way. So when I was out visiting in, I think it was Jackson County, Josephine County, they showed me this 25-page handout that they try to give to people in these complex cases. Can you imagine trying to understand the law that it takes a lawyer 3 years to learn, and you've got a 25-page handout? And then I saw in another county the line of people waiting. They had a position called a court facilitator. Fabulous position. We could use so many more of them. but the line was down the hall. They were going to get a 1-hour appointment 3 weeks from now to help facilitate, to navigate the system. So the burden of the non-represented people really does fall on the courts, and it's a pressing need. These are our most basic needs, and I hope that later on in the discussion we can talk more about not just how to make it so that we can resolve the many cases that come to us, but also so we can help with solving the problems that plague our communities. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Justice. Madam Attorney General, would you like to tell us a little about yourself and your perspective on infrastructure?
Okay, now, didn't work before. No, I'm going to try to do it this way so I don't have to hold it. Can you all hear me okay? No, that's not going to work. All right, I'll hold it. How about now? You don't like this one? Okay, I'm going to use go out of turn before or something. Good afternoon, and thank you so much, Senator, for holding this event, and to Rosie and your amazing staff, Gordon, everyone who has just been total rock stars. I don't know how you pull it off each year. Each year it's just more exciting, even better attended, which is hard to imagine. And it is such an honor to be on this panel with my colleagues, our incredible Chief Justice. I think we should hear it for her. She is truly amazing. I'm sorry, I know your hand is stepping up to her because I have to appear before her as well. But I've known Chief Justice Walters for many years, and I knew that we needed her. I didn't know how much she would love the job, and I think you can tell from this that she is literally the poster child for trust and confidence in the judicial system, right here sitting next to me. So thank you so much. It's an honor to have you in this role, and it's also a pleasure to be with our University of Oregon president. Even if he didn't go to U of O, he has made up for it in spades if you're lucky enough to be on his holiday card list. He's always across the table doing something, playing checkers or whatever with the U of O duck. So it's really fun to see you kind of growing into being a duck, whether or not you have the degree. I'm sure we'll give you some honorary ones just to be sure. So how many of you have served as jurors? I'm guessing a lot of hands are going to go up. Yeah, many, many. Thank you so much for that. The other day as I was going through security at the airport, this nice TSA officer looks at me and he says, "Attorney General." And I'm, "Oh, you know who I am?" He says, "I was on your jury back when you were first, starting out as a judge. It was that horrible case. It was a horrible case, the rape of an elderly woman. But what he said was, I remember to this day that you taught me the difference between burglary and robbery. And thank you very much for that." I guess come in handy. Anyways, it just goes to show how people do really respect the judicial system. They remember their experience as jurors. They remember their experience as witness, sometimes bad, sometimes good. They certainly remember their experience as victims. Of course, they don't want to be there, but they need to be there. And thankfully, we have now laws that require judges and my office to make sure, and DAs, of course, not only to make sure they're there, but that they're comfortable and that they understand the process. And all of this takes judicial resources, takes resources of the state, but it is just so incredibly important and valuable. So it's an honor to be a part of the system. I actually was one of those 200 judges that the Chief Justice referred to for 22 years. So I sometimes consider being Attorney General my bonus career. I really had a career as a judge, and I thought maybe that's why they want me on this panel. Maybe they want me to kind of go back a little bit into my past, which of course provided me, I think, with sort of a base to do this, hopefully, to do this job well as AG. But I do remember well those years, both as a trial judge in Multnomah County, although I started out practicing in Eugene. And in fact, Florence was my first coastal city. I would come over here as an undergraduate, I'm a double duck, and I would come over to go crabbing off the dock in Florence, and this is where I learned to crab, and then I would have, my roommates would make me get up at 3 in the morning to come over and get the best, the water just at the right moment when the crabs were coming in, right? Anyway, so I did start out in Eugene in private practice, actually taking court appointments every day. That's how I got my trial legs, if you will. I didn't care what cases I got, I just wanted to go to court. I got to go to a juvenile court a lot because those were cases that were available to new lawyers. We weren't always up to it, but we did our best. And of course, misdemeanor level criminal cases, as well as some civil cases. And then I had the privilege to work in the United States Attorney's Office for about 8 years as a federal prosecutor, where I did white-collar crime, mostly economic-related crimes. And then I was fortunate to get an appointment to the bench once I had moved to the Portland office. So, kind of gotten the full picture of the legal profession and also the judicial infrastructure, though that wasn't a term that I had actually thought much about until this. Our Chief Justice has given you the lowdown. I am not going to even try to match that on what the current state of the judicial infrastructure is, but I do want to just affirm, it's pretty much ditto, yes, I agree with everything she said, but I want to just comment on a couple of things regarding the most pressing needs that I observe, both from having served as a judge and now having served the last 7.5 years as Attorney General. First of all, she didn't mention this, but this is kind of an embarrassing statistic, okay, I'm going to share with you today. We are the 50th in state judicial salaries in the country. I think you know how many states there are, right? So that's kind of embarrassing, right? That's not acceptable. And that's when adjusted for COLA, for cost of living. Look, you've heard it from our wonderful local judge, Judge Batter, and you've heard it from our Chief Justice, and you'll hear it from me. We need qualified, high-level judges. We don't need judges who can't make it in practice, and so they decide to become judges. And I'm not saying we have those, but we don't necessarily attract the judges that we need to do some of the complex civil litigation, for example, because of, frankly, those incredibly low salaries. We need to be able to pay lawyers well enough, to both district attorneys and public defenders. That is essential. Why? Because these cases, as you heard from our chief, they are critical cases, and most of our defendants cannot afford a lawyer, and so we need to appoint them high-level, qualified, excellent lawyers of integrity and skill. And the only way to ensure that we can do that is to be able to compete. Frankly, that's what it's about, right? We all understand competition. Well, it's about competing because the legal profession has lawyers at all different levels of experience, and the salary should be commensurate with that. A judge who's been in practice for 25 years should not be paid less than a lawyer who's been in practice for 5 years. And that is often the case, is it not? Thank you. Okay, so that's number one. We need high quality, well-trained, diverse, and compassionate lawyers and judges. We need a sufficient number, and we need salaries to go along with that. There's a huge amount of burnout in the legal profession. And there's a lot that's being talked about and a lot that's being done to address that, but it is a very serious problem, and it does pertain to essentially not having enough bodies and enough time in the day. If you go home at night and you just spend the whole night preparing for the next morning, you're not going to get enough rest, and you're not going to be ready for the very difficult day ahead, whether it's a child abuse case, whether it's a criminal case, or a complex civil case. So that is something, self-care is very important. It's kind of like infrastructure, sort of a new concept for me thinking about self-care. Do I take good enough care of myself? Probably not. Don't ask me what I do for exercise. I think it's mostly just getting into my car and getting out. But I'm working on it. Access to justice for all. I mean, it sounds a little bit almost trite, but it is absolutely critical. Do you know that there's actually studies now that show that people don't recognize, many people do not even recognize that they have a legal problem. So those aren't the people that are going to court unrepresented. They're not going to court at all. They haven't even realized that they have a legal problem. So there is so much that we have to do. and we absolutely need to fund legal services, legal aid at higher levels. And fortunately, there are some opportunities, it looks like, to be able to do that. And thank you to our legislature so much for what you have done to support the funding of legal services in our state. Finally, also as noted, courts must be available. Justice delayed is justice denied. And this includes our court facilities, our courthouses. I lived in that Multnomah County Courthouse for 16 years, and I would look up above me at the beautiful marble, and I started worrying that the marble was gonna fall over in the earthquake right on top of me, and I actually moved out of that courtroom because I was nervous about it. So, look, we need safe courthouses, and thank goodness we now have the funding for the new Multnomah County Courthouse. And I hope that all the rural counties as well that need new courthouses get them, because they need to be safe. You know, judges come in voluntarily, but jurors don't, right? You can actually get summoned. Certainly, victims and witnesses don't, and defendants don't. So we can't force people to come into our courthouses if they're not safe. You know, I closed my answer to this first question, I hope I didn't take the whole hour, with a story about one of my former colleagues on the Multnomah County bench. She didn't have children, and I did. So I was always kind of okay with kids being in the courtroom, even though it wasn't a very good place for them to be. But guess what she did? She started childcare in the courthouse, and it has become, court care has become a statewide program now, and that is my dear colleague, Janice Wilson. So you have Judge Wilson to thank for court care. A lot of people don't know that. And it's because she could not tolerate children in her courtroom. And some of the rest of us were like, oh well. So thank you to Judge Wilson for that. We all work together to make sure that kids are safe, and that's a really great way to do it as well. Thank you.
President Schill.
So, let me just say what a delight it is to be here today, starting my 5th year as president of the University of Oregon. And one of the first things I did upon becoming president was come to the Coastal Conference. And I've been here every single year. Arnie, thank you so much for putting this together. I always learn something, and I think it's a wonderful opportunity to meet people. Now, normally when I come, I'm put on a panel to talk about why the state should support higher education. Today I'm in a slightly different role, but I have to say, I can still make the point without having to talk about it by just looking at who's up here with me, right? Look at who put this together. Arnie Rosenblum, graduate degree from the University of Oregon. Marty, law degree from the University of Oregon. Martha, law degree, University of Oregon. Ellen, 2 degrees from the University of Oregon. These are among the most important people in our state. These are people who are educated in our public universities. That says something about the value of our public universities to the state and to our nation. And I'm very pleased and proud to be up here in your presence. Now let me get to my topic for today, which is not so much about judicial infrastructure. I am a real estate lawyer. I spent no time when I was in private practice in court. I was a clerk for a judge. That was about it. But I have been dean of 2 law schools, UCLA Law School and the University of Chicago Law School, and now I'm president of the University of Oregon, with one of the great law schools in the entire nation. And I'm very proud of that. And so I can speak from the view of higher education and how we fit in to the system of justice in the state of Oregon. So the way I think about it is, we fit in about 3 ways. I think every list should only have 3 elements to it, so I managed to cram everything into 3. Among the most important ways that the University of Oregon can help the state and can serve a role in the state is to deal with an issue that both Martha and Ellen brought up, which is access to justice. What we know is, and I think, Martha, you said 15% of the need, that legal aid can only serve 15% of the need. Our nation is increasingly a nation of complicated laws. And it is extraordinarily important, whether it's marital, family, whether it's bankruptcy law, mortgage foreclosure law, people need to be represented. They need to understand the law, and we don't do a good enough job in providing that assistance. But the law school, we do our bit. We try to do that. So among the things that we do at the University of Oregon, I also have a faculty appointment at the University of Oregon Law School, so it's a we, is we provide, one of the things we do is provide stipends to students to work over the summers in legal assistance. So our students work over the summers for Oregon Law Center, for the Legal Aid Society, for the Public Defender, providing needed extra assistance. Now they get something also, which is the experience, the Attorney General's office. So our students are interns, and we provide stipends to many of them, and to many we just provide the training. So that's one thing. The law school also provides direct service itself, not through an intermediary organization, but the law school itself provides. Just give you a few examples. We have a program called Wills for the Underserved. So our students work with low and moderate income people to develop wills, to help them settle their estates and understand where their resources are going to go. We also have a whole set of legal clinics which are providing services to people who wouldn't otherwise have them, including our domestic violence clinic, our small business clinic, criminal defense, and I spoke with our dean of our law school, Marcelin Burke, yesterday. We're also talking to various stakeholders about developing a rural pro bono project. I think one of the things we're seeing in our nation, we definitely see it in our state, is a divide between urban areas and rural areas. And one of the things that we can do as a university is to provide some assistance in healing that divide and providing services into our rural areas. Another thing that we can do, one of the reasons why we have so few lawyers who are able to provide assistance to low and moderate income people is because the cost of law school is high and students take on debt. So one of the things that law schools do, including our law school, is provide loan repayment assistance. Now you don't need, if you're gonna go practice at Stoll Reeves, you don't need loan repayment assistance. You can pay off your loan. But if you're gonna do legal aid, you need it. It just becomes impossible. So one of the things we can do to assist with access to justice is provide our students with the ability to pay off their loans so they can do the work that they want to do. They can do the work that is their calling and that the state requires. We also have a Native American law program, which is training lawyers to work among the many tribes in the state and representing those tribes. I'm really proud of that. Another category, in addition to providing access to justice, is law reform. One of the things that we know is law is always changing. What you just say, 700 new laws. Okay, well, that's probably still not enough in terms of changing the laws, simplifying the laws. And one of the things that we have found, and we always find, is laws that are made too hastily have bad consequences. Better than not to have a law at all than to have the unintended consequences of laws. And I'm sure all of you who are legislators out there have your law that you sponsored, that you said, boy, if I had more people looking at this at the time, it wouldn't have had the consequence and required me to amend it many times thereafter. So we're really pleased. As of last year, we are hosting the Oregon Law Commission, which looks at simplifying law, amending law, studying law. Very excited about that. This last year, they worked in the Capitol Workplace Harassment Project, and I don't know what that's on the agenda for next year, but we're really delighted to be supporting that at the University of Oregon. And of course, all of our faculty research is very important. important in that area. Lastly, and I'll take the least amount of time to discuss this because it's so obvious what you see up on this panel, is we supply students to serve government and to serve the judiciary. Not only do you have Martha, Ellen, when you were a judge, as judges, we provide law clerks. Many of your law clerks are going to be graduates of the university. We provide interns. We provide students who will go on, do great things, and then become state representatives like Marty. So essentially, the role that we have in providing the human capital that allows justice to exist in our state, that allows us to move forward with legislation, that is another function that higher education can play, another value component that higher education in the legal profession can make. So with that, back on to you, Marty.
Thank you. And I would say, as perhaps the least accomplished lawyer here, I was just a couple of years out of law school on September 12th, 2001, and I was stationed at Lackland Air Force Base, which at the time was the Air Force's largest hospital, and we got notice that they were going to deploy 800 people from the hospital to go to New York City to take care of people injured in the bombings there. We wrote 200 wills, my team wrote 200 wills and 400 powers of attorneys in one day to help them deploy, and that was because of the preparation I got at the University of Oregon. So, thank you. Did we have any comments from Chief Justice and Attorney General about the...
I think it's just interesting that you can kind of tell from this whole discussion that we're part of a system. Every part of the system has to work together for us to be able to serve the needs of justice. And I wanted to say something. I didn't get to compliment the other two, how great it is to have an Attorney General with the breadth of experience that she has, and the lawyers in her office are amazingly prepared and fabulous advocates, as are the public defenders who appear before us. We've got a great cadre of lawyers making our jobs easier, trained by the University of Oregon, many of them, and I do have a law clerk this term from the University of Oregon Law School, and we appreciate not just the lawyers, but the social scientists, all of the research that's being done and the thinking about the problems that our state faces. I really feel like we can work together on those problems, and that we're coming to that more and more as we have events like this. So thank you.
And also, thank you. And also, just to follow up from what President Schill said, just to give you a sense of what a pathway looks like for a public interest, public servant lawyer who comes out of the clerkship program. We hire at the Oregon Department of Justice about 60 or 70 law clerks from the 3 law schools in Oregon, and some law schools outside the state as well, every year, every summer. In fact, I have ice cream socials for all of them, so I know how many ice cream bars I have to buy. And they then continue with us often throughout the following year, maybe even the following 2 years if it's after their first year, which it frequently is. And they get opportunities to spend time in different divisions of the Oregon Department of Justice, and there's 9 divisions, 5 legal divisions. So it can be a great opportunity for them to get kind of a smorgasbord of what public law looks like. And then, guess what? They're very highly qualified to clerk for our courts. And so the Chief Justice, the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeals, and of course our trial courts also often hire some of the best graduates of our law schools to clerk for them for 1 or 2 years. And then guess what? We get to steal them after that for our honors program, which is for brand new lawyers. They cannot have practiced law to qualify for our honors attorney program. And often those honors attorneys are the ones who stay with us and become some of our absolute best lawyers, the ones that Chief was referring to. So I just want to give you a sense of how that can work very successfully and does.
Thank you, Madam Attorney General. Would you like to tell us a little about the role of DOJ in the justice system?
Yeah. Sure. So DOJ is big. You know, it's like part of the bureaucracy. It's an state agency, right? 1,300 employees, about half of which are well, actually not half, well, about half of which actually work for child support. I'm going to talk about that a little bit, but about 300 are lawyers, and about 300 support the lawyers by being paralegals and clerks and secretaries and so on. But like all law firms, and like all of us, in fact, like everyone who's not working directly within the courts, we are the consumers of the justice system. And so that's why we need to care about this conversation. The Oregon Department of Justice is the largest law firm in the state, and we hope to provide the gold standard of legal service to state government. That's what we exist for, is to be the lawyers for the state of Oregon. There's hardly anything in the justice system that we don't touch in Oregon. So just to give you an idea of what those divisions are, I mentioned 9. The legal divisions are general counsel. They're the ones who actually give the legal advice to the state agencies, boards, commissions, sometimes the legislators if they ask, or even the governor. We have a trial division that represents the state. If there's a case where the state has been sued, we got to go to trial. We have an appellate division. Our appellate division handles every criminal appeal in Oregon. So if there's an appeal from a conviction, we work on, the district attorneys do not handle those appeals. We handle them on their behalf. And also other types of appeals where the state is a party. We have a criminal justice division, fondly known as CJ. That division has DUI, domestic violence, and elder abuse prosecutors that are called resource prosecutors, and they circulate all throughout the state, helping to bring some of the more difficult cases along with district attorneys, or sometimes if they ask us to, we handle them for them. We also have a civil enforcement division that includes child advocacy, consumer protection, charities, and going after monies that are owed to the state. So I want to just mention very briefly 4 of the programs that we have that I think that are particularly important for you to know about. One is our child support program. I mentioned half of our employees. We have 11 child support offices. You may not have known, we collect $1 million in Oregon every day in child support, every single day. So what this program does, obviously it works to help to keep families off of public assistance. And we successfully work with families and with the counties, not only to make sure that child support is promptly paid, but also to find employment, help find employment for the obligor, the person who owes the child support. We also help the families with accessing other state services, including the services of the courts. We have a new computer system, yay! Thank you to our legislature for supporting that. It's called Origin. It's now fully rolled out, and that makes the payment of support easier for all concerned and also more transparent. We have learned that the obligor, the person who owes the money, if that person becomes involved in the process and actually gets to see their children and we can help with visitation and such, the greater likelihood of sustained payment on that person's part. If we have to go to court, and we do sometimes, for contempt of court, for failure to pay, for determining paternity, and those sorts of things that we also do, then we need to be able to go to court and be able to get justice for these families. We also have a strong, I'm sure you're aware of it, I hope you all know we have a hotline, a consumer protection hotline. We get over 30,000 calls a year on our consumer protection hotline, and we have live volunteers, well-trained, who answer the phones and who respond to those. If you ever call us and you don't get a response, let me personally know. I know a couple of you have done that, and I apologize for that if we didn't get back to you right away. We work hard to resolve those complaints. We try to keep people out of having to hire a lawyer or going to court. We try to get money back for people so that they can get justice, and those who have, ripped them off, frankly, or even scammed them are accountable. It's hard to go after some of those real scammers, because as we know, they often come to us online. They're often out of the country. They're often certainly out of state. So we try to resolve and prevent those types of scams from happening. We have a very active education and prevention program. We settle a lot of big cases. Just as an example, recently we've settled cases for millions of dollars against each of these companies. One is called ITT. It's a for-profit school company. Uber. You've heard of some of these, I bet. Equifax. And by the way, you can get money back from Equifax if you submit your application online to their Equifax breach settlement.com. Write that down if you want $125 back from Equifax, you can get it. Volkswagen, data breaches. Unfortunately, data breaches are becoming more and more common, and they're huge, and we're able to get monies back. And that money that we get back will go often in part for restitution, but also to the state, so that we can then use it to support ourselves and not in our consumer protection work, and not have to go to our legislators, many of whom I can see in the front row here, to ask for general funds. We do not ask you for general funds for our consumer protection work. So I'm pleased that we're able to do that work. And then just very quickly, our Crime Victims and Survivor Services Division. You may not be aware that we have an entire division focused on outreach to underserved, often marginalized and oppressed communities. Certainly anyone who is a victim of a violent crime, we want to hear from in order to help them not only obtain services, but to provide them through what essentially is an in-house insurance company, our Victims Compensation Fund. We, in 2018, received over 5,000 claims and paid out just under $3.5 million. So you can kind of begin to get an idea of what we're able to do in our for crime victims and survivors. We added the word survivors because we realized, and I think many of you who work in this area know, that you don't want to feel like you're a victim, right? And certainly there are victims, and that's still the language in our statutes, but we consider someone who's made it through this process and who's worked hard to get through it a survivor, and that's how they want to be called as well. And then the final one I'm going to mention is our child advocacy work on behalf of abused and neglected children. We've now had a full rollout of legal representation in every county in the state. Again, thanks to our legislature for helping us to make that possible. We work very closely with the courts to ensure that when we go to court on behalf of children, it's a smooth process. It's obviously very traumatic for so many involved, and we very much appreciate the opportunity to partner with the courts and with the various agencies throughout the state that serve kids. So that is a real quick lowdown on what we do at the Department of Justice, and I'm really honored to serve as your Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Attorney General. Well, with the panel's permission, I think I'm going to skip to back to Chief Justice here and ask, how can municipal and justice courts bridge the access to justice gap, particularly in rural areas, including the coast, and what role do specialty courts play?
Thank you, Representative Bowlby. Yes, it's very important that courts be close to the people, and the municipal courts and the justice of the peace courts are very close to the people, and they can help with access to justice in that way. They have very limited jurisdiction. They generally are only dealing with violations. They handle some landlord-tenant cases and some small claims types of cases. So in terms of the whole breadth of what we have to do as a judicial system, they're fairly narrow, but it's important that that people feel like they've got a place to go in their communities to get these kind of problems solved. We have to remember when we're talking about these local courts that they can't be self-supporting. In other words, it's a really bad idea to issue fines and then use those fines to support the courts, because it gives the wrong incentive. So communities that want to have these courts really have to recognize that they need to be providing general funds for their operation. And so you have to wonder how cost effective it is to create a local system of courts. It can be beneficial for the people who live there, but you also have to remember that justice of the peaces have to be lawyers. Municipal court judges don't, but they still need the training to be able to apply the laws, and it's hard enough at our state level to provide the kind of training that's necessary. So there's just a lot of things to think about when you're thinking about whether these local courts, how best to have them work. I want to, since we're on that topic though, of providing access to justice, talk to you a little bit more about the kinds of things that our courts are doing to try to increase access to justice. We're trying to have telephone and video hearings so people don't have to come to our courthouses. We've got maybe many more self-help videos that we're using. We've got online fillable forms so that when people come to our courts, they've already filled out forms, kind of like in TurboTax, so that things will work more quickly there. And we're talking about devising a system to resolve cases online, have kind of like an online mediation dispute resolution system where you might even get the benefit of a mediator or a judge at some point in that process. So we're continuing to work on those really difficult issues of access to justice. If we can just get time to breathe, I think we're going to be able to make some progress.
Well, so we're running a little short on time, so I thought I'd try to get through at least the primary people for each question. President Schill, can you highlight any programs and policies that have been good investments for the state, and what can we learn from these efforts and innovative next steps?
Well, obviously, some of the programs are programs that provide legal assistance and provide grants and support for legal assistance are probably among the most important in order to create more access to justice. Obviously, one of the things that's supported is as I mentioned a moment ago, is the Oregon Law Commission, which gives us an opportunity to be thinking about law in the future and how we can revise law in the future. So, and then obviously, it's important, even though outside of what I do at the university, if the court system doesn't have the personnel and doesn't have the skilled personnel to be able to hear cases and resolve cases in an expeditious way, it's just going to be a real logjam in people achieving justice in the state. So all of those things, unfortunately, cost money and their resources, and as we all know, that's very difficult in today's environment. Nonetheless, it's really important for all the reasons that Ellen and Martha have indicated.
I just wanted to mention on that the Oregon Law Commission, and we have a lot of judges on that Oregon Law Commission, that's all volunteer time that we spend trying to improve the law. And so many of these projects, all they require is time, and we can make real advances. But there's a lot of people just volunteering throughout, lawyers and judges and all kinds of people in the community trying to make these things happen. So we're not saying that we have to have money for every single one of them, but we have to have some kind of support for them. And just to give you an idea of some other projects where we've made good investments that really have mattered for our state. One is our eCourt program. We now have online, all of the filings in our courts are online, so people can do those 24 hours a day. You don't have to rush to the courthouse. The courthouse doesn't have to be open. You can pay online. We've got a brand new central violations bureau, so that violation parking tickets can be adjusted and throughout the entire state online. The eCourt project came in. It was one of the very first statewide IT projects on time, on budget, and it's been fabulous. We provide information through that eCourt program, through the Department of Corrections, the DMV, the state police. Everybody's using this, and it's efficient for the whole state. Another program that's really been beneficial to our state are what we call our treatment courts, our specialty courts, our problem-solving courts. These are our drug courts, our veterans courts, our mental health courts. These are courts where when people have been convicted of a crime, rather than going into the corrections system, we work with them, and it is, again, it's non-siloed. We have people from from probation officers, we've got mental health people, we've got people who work with housing, people who work with all aspects, education of people's lives to get them up and going and be successful. And I know you've heard some of those stories of people who were addicted to opiates, their lives were a mess, they went through these treatment courts, and they're able to stand on their feet, and we've reduced the number of people in the criminal justice system. It's money up front that once it takes a lot of effort up front, but in the long run, it reduces the problems that we've got. Those problem-solving courts are generally grant funded. We right now have lost some of the money for them, and it's very worrisome that we know how to make some of these things happen. We can do these things, and the other thing that we really need is data collection, to be able to have the time and money to put systems in place where we can collect the data, analyze what works, do pilot projects, come back. We've learned a lot, and there's just so much more that we can do.
Thank you, Chief. And since you mentioned data collection, I would also like to add that an investment by the legislature in data collection, both with respect to police profiling and hate crimes, and several other projects that we've had that the legislature has endorsed and helped us to move forward. We have a wonderful opportunity through the Criminal Justice Commission to not only get the data, but then crunch the numbers and be able to actually know what's going on in our communities. It is so essential, not only to our work with the courts, but just to all of our work. And I wanted to give a kudos shout out to the courts for one other thing related to kind of, I guess it's still considered an innovation, but we so appreciate our ability to be able to have video appearances throughout the state. Because, you know, we do have a number of branch offices. We're gonna hopefully have our next one at the coast. We still don't have a DOJ office over here. But it saves the state travel costs for our lawyers to get over to the coast, and allows each lawyer to take on a greater volume of cases to be able to have video appearances. So we really appreciate that the courts generally are willing to let us do that.
Well, just in closing here, I guess one of the privileges of the moderator, tell a little war story. When I was in Afghanistan, I had many mixed moments, but I was actually feeling really good about one moment where I was going to it was called the Judicial Stage graduation. It was their judicial training academy, and we worked really hard, and we graduating 200 new judges to fill critical billets throughout the country, and including 13 of the top 14 graduates were women, somewhat unusually for that culture. And so I turned to the Chief Justice and said, well, this is great. How soon do you think we can get them out to the field? And he said, oh, we can't send them to the field. I said, well, why not? Well, we can't provide for their security. They're just going to have to work here in Kabul. So I guess what I want to say is thank you for all you do to support the judicial system. It is your tax dollars that provide the judicial infrastructure and provide that access and make it possible for us to provide these services to our Argonians. So thank you all for coming here today.